Okay, good morning and welcome to the session today. I am excited to be hosting this session with you. And I know we have a cross section of persons. I'm seeing we have a number of persons from different faculties. So we are looking forward to an interesting session today. We are practitioners, and so you come with experience. I'd really want to involve you in the whole process. I'd want you to um, interact, so you can certainly ask questions as you go along. There are no interruptions planned for this session, so if in case we do have a blackout, we'll have to reschedule this. And we ask you to keep your water close by because we'll be taking breaks in between. And we anticipate that this is going to be an hour and 30 minutes, and then we'll have some opportunities for some group work. All right, so I want to say welcome, and we begin by ensuring that we have a clear idea that this is a session that we've done before, and we've actually updated to reflect AI. All right, so if you can see my screen in the chat room, just indicate. If you can see my screen, you can see the screen. I'm sure that you are seeing it. So good morning, all. One word that describes your day thus far in the chat room. If you can share that, one word that describes your day. Michelle, welcome. One word that describes your day thus far. Quickly as we go. Lovely. Lovely is the word that describes your day, Michelle. All right. Lovely. Any others? One word that describes your day thus far. Anyone else? I'm seeing we have Christine, we have Andrew, Dr. Andrew Hunt, Dr. Avanal Ali. One word, midweek crisis. I love this one, midweek crisis. Midweek crisis. Anyone else? Randy saying, fantastic. Dr. Hunt, happy. And Dr. Jones, Juliet is saying busy. One word, continue. Let's get those words coming. Okay, so today is someone's birthday, but yes, birthday. So happy birthday, Dr. Ali. Am I good to say that it's your
Thank you so
birthday?
much, Doc. Yes.
Well, blessings to you, well
Blessings.
wishes to you, and I do
Thank
hope that
you.
I will not spoil it with this
Of course not.
presentation. So yes, let's send a greetings, all of us. Let's send some love to Dr. Ali. Let's wish him happy birthday. I think
Happy birthday,
he's
Dr.
really
Ali. Happy
excited.
birthday.
Thank you,
He's really
colleagues.
excited.
Blessings.
All right. Okay. So we want to go straight into our presentation because we know we certainly let me just yeah. Uh, sorry, I just had to send a call away. All right. So it's important that we look at assessment, and the link with student success is certainly an important one. I know that we've been rethinking our assessments on the past 2 years. We've been trying to see how we can do things differently, but in a very meaningful way. We want to just look at some of the themes that address student success, and that has been a theme that has been resurging of in recent times in terms of um, what does it mean in from that sense. All right. Okay. You know that you will be successful today if we're able to differentiate the traditional, the authentic types of assessment. We'll be looking at that. We'll be looking at the characteristics of authentic assessment, but we're also looking at how we can deepen our appreciation for assessment practices that support student success. And that includes being able to even use a variety of assessment instruments and using AI to also do that. So we anticipate that we will draw on those. But there are some prerequisites or some things that I'm assuming in assessment, in that there is sometimes the blurring between how we use the terms measurement, assessment, and evaluation. Um, the terms are used interchangeably, but they do mean different things. And for us, when we use the word assessment, we are at times addressing those various things. Sometimes we even use the word testing. And so it is clear that assessment, when seen from a wider lens, provides a way for us to see the various basic foundational terms that are used. One of the things we also know as a prerequisite is effective feedback is important for assessment to be seen as important and timely. It has to be timely, it has to be goal-oriented. It should be ongoing, and the whole idea of encouraging metacognition or self-assessment is an important component. We know that feedback forms an important part of assessment. What we also know is that there is the assessment that takes place before, assessment that takes place during, and assessment that takes place after. So there is quite a resurgence in the move for more assessment during. So and that is called assessment for learning, the whole formative process of assessment. And we do recognize the importance of all three in terms of modes, but at the same time we recognize there is a need to deepen our commitment to the formative, because it encourages so many different things, in particular the metacognition in terms of reflection, in terms of the cognitive load, in terms of assessment, linking assessment to the outcomes. It makes it much more easier if you do it during rather than after, so the students will actually build their competencies as they're moving along in the thing. But there is also the tendency, and you may not be seeing this clearly, you can look quickly at it to really see assessment. I see now this is cut out a little bit. Assessment as an instruction as two different things, but there's a relationship. But I love what Martin and his colleagues, when they look at assessment as teaching and learning. It's not separate. It's a key part of teaching and learning. You know, it says another approach is to acknowledge the symbiotic relationship between assessment and teaching and learning. And so from this perspective, it's not an activity, discrete activity connected at the end, to check how well material have been understood, but it's more part of an ongoing process of teaching and learning, which is embedded in a network of consideration of a person's skills, knowledge, and reflection. So it's important that we see that as an important part, and that's commonplace. One of the things that we're trying to demystify, that it should be more formative. But we also recognize this is a board 95 that says that students can escape bad teaching, but it's important for us to see that they can't escape bad assessment. All right, and so that's important. That's important for us to see that. Let's discuss quickly. What are some of the problems that we have with assessment? I'm not going to ask for a breakout room. It did say that, but I'm going to just ask you to hold the mic. Some of the problems you have. What are some of the problems we have with assessments? If you can use the mic, then that would be great. I know we have a very nice and small and intimate group here. So what are some of the problems do we have with assessments? So we have Afia, we have Avalon, we have Andrew, we have Juliet, Michelle, Patrice, Stephen, Sethra, Patrice.
Okay, one fair, Leroy. Good morning,
Yes,
everyone. One
yes.
fair is providing timely feedback, especially when you have a lot to accomplish, and
Mm-hmm.
just to be providing timely feedback to the students.
Okay, so
That's one
timely
fair.
feedback. All right, thank you so much, Michelle. I appreciate that. Scheduling to minimize assessment overload. So thanks for that. Thanks for that. That's an important component. Anyone else? Colleagues, you can put it in the chat if you don't want to use the mic. I really want you to interact. We know what these problems are, but we need to acknowledge them at least. So let's do that. Dr. Jones, go ahead, Juliet.
Dr. Hill, thank you. Good morning. Some students complain that they get big surprises when they see the final exam.
Okay, so the surprises there is hinting to something, and the surprising there could be that they didn't cover some of the elements from a topical standpoint or from an outcome standpoint. So that means there was an alignment issue. It could be more than alignment, but certainly it was an alignment. Thank you for that, Juliet. Anyone else? Afia? So I'm going to ask each person to give me one at least. All right. So I'll start with Afia, and then we'll go down from there. All right. So Stephen is saying being very okay. So the questions are being unambiguous in setting questions. All right. Go ahead, Afia. I'm not hearing you.
Oh, sorry, your audio is very low on my end.
Oh, it's very low. Okay.
Yes. And some of the problems that I have with assessments is sometimes people not always understanding completely what it is they need to do.
Mm-hmm. By people, you mean the students?
Yeah, correct. The students.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Go
ahead.
I think that dovetails very well with what Stephen is saying.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much, Afia. Avalon, Michelle, you already gave me one. Patrice, Stephra, Stephen, you already gave me one. Stephra, you already gave me one as well. So if we get each person to identify one problem they have, we will continue. All right, let's do that quickly. The quicker you do it, the quicker we can move on. So disconnected and getting students to read and understand what the questions are asking. I think that's an important point. Juliet is saying relevance of assessment to the real work context and situations. That's a big one. That is a big one, certainly. All right. We see that quite getting noted in recently with the whole idea of authentic assessment. And I'm seeing another one where Javed is saying marking papers when classes are large. Okay, that's a problem. Any of you have that challenge? Thank you, Javed, for that one. All right, so we do have a number of challenges that we own, but the research from Board and Vok and Thompson 2010 certainly see that we have a number of those. We're going to go through some of those, but we recognize the whole idea of insufficient time for students to do, and you see the assessment. That's a common one, I think. When you don't really do the good load, calculating the load, the cognitive load for the students to do it, that certainly is a challenge. Number one, I think that's what Dr. Jones started out in terms of when the students you've done this and then this was not taught to us, but it's coming on the test. All right, so assessment tasks do not mark the stated learning outcomes, which means that they would not have had the opportunity to really measure, from a valid standpoint. Again, I think, Stephen, you're looking at in terms of the marking criteria. And it's not known to the students, it's not clear to the students. That's certainly one of the things we want to do. Students understanding, number 4, I think that was also brought out through the discussion. So certainly we see some of those coming out very carefully. Number 9, I think, Javed, you had claimed that one in terms of time for faculty to staff to mark the assignments or examination, or too many. I mean, the too many part, I do know that some would get some teaching assistants to assist, but certainly we recognize that it's an important component. All right. And we also see variation in assessment demands and lack of, you know, the self-check of our programs. And some programs, they don't, if you don't review them to really find out what some of the challenges, it certainly is one of those things that we want to identify. But I would also want to add that good assessment, what does it look like? It's supposed to help clarify what good performance is, you know, in terms of the goals, the criteria, the standards. If you have a good assessment, it's supposed to help clarify that. And it's supposed to encourage time on, you know, on task in terms of doing those challenging tasks. It also, from a standpoint, we also see that it encourages interaction and dialogue. So good assessment encourages that. So many times we see the persons using Socratic tone, probing in synchronous sessions. That's part of assessment. So you're really encouraging the students to think, and that dialogue can be something that is continuous, especially if in your online class. That's why you would use discussion forums, because that becomes a way for the students to really make sense of the learning experience. All right, and we see also number 9 and 10, support the development of learning communities, as well as help you to adapt teaching to student needs. But I will start with this issue here of alignment, and Biggs and his has been touting this for a long time, and in higher education, this is one of the things we look at, that there should be a careful alignment between the learning outcomes, the activities, and assessments. I mean, we know commonplace when it comes to the face-to-face, but even more so when you're transferring or your face-to-face to an online or blended course. One of the things you want to look at is the fitness to purpose. So what may be an activity you use in a face-to-face may not be that appropriate in an online or blended course. And so it is important for us to see that link between the outcome, the assessment, and the activities that you do. Any questions? Another issue that came out, and we saw that coming out, is the whole idea of reliability and validity. So what it is it's simply that if you purport to test a particular or measure up something particular and you did not do it, therefore it is not, the exam or the testing or the assessment is not valid. All right. And reliability refers to the ability to get the similar scores consistent repeatedly. These continue to be seen as an important aspect. All right. If you look at this diagram here, you see a very good, it's an illustration of the differences between reliable and valid. You can see the first figure there. There are 4 dots. You're not seeing it, but there are 4 dots. 4 dots actually hit the target. All right, so it's bullseye, and it means therefore that the bow person hitting the bow and arrow or the dots, they are on point, that they are valid, and they're also consistent, so there is also reliable. The second one, we see there that they are not hitting the center, which means that they're not valid, but they are consistent because all of them are hitting the same spot. All right, so sometimes we do get that taking place. All right, and we also see where the last one, where they're all over the place, they are not being reliable, they're not being consistent, neither be valid. And so there are different reasons why these things will exist. And by the way, there are different types of validity and different types of, but we certainly don't want to go deep into those. But that certainly is a problem in terms of assessment. Another issue that is in higher education is that our assessment tend to be sometimes very, very, and Stephen, you mentioned it, very, very unclear. And so Wilkie Mess and her colleagues put forward the idea of transparent assessment design. And I encourage you, transparent assessment design provides a way for you to make things as clear as possible to your students. And the research around this supports the idea that the more transparent your assessment is, the greater chances for student success, student understanding and student success. So the students will understand the assessment. And what it is it's including those three things. All right, so it's including those three things in there carefully. All right. So the whole idea of the purpose, the task, and the criteria is important here. All right, so we see the criteria. What actually does this assignment have? What is the purpose of this in terms of the real world context, or in terms of them being able to function in a practical, in a practical or pragmatic or within a professional sense, or why are they doing it? So it's important for us to give that explanation to the students. All right. I think another important problem to really understand is the whole idea of bias, and bias that is unconscious. And so sometimes trying to control the unconscious bias, or trying to really ensure that is minimized or is important. And I like the way this video outlined here. Actually, I'm going to just play this video quickly for you, and then we can take it from there. All right, just give me a second.
The human brain is an amazing thing. Your conscious mind captures about 50 bits of data every single second. The only problem is, in the same single second, your brain actually receives about 10 million bits of data. So what happens to the rest? Well, it gets processed by our unconscious mind, which makes almost instantaneous decisions about everything around us without us realizing it. And to do that, it uses a whole series of shortcuts and rules of thumb based on our background, culture, environment, and personal experience. By way of an example, here's 2 questions for you. See if you can notice how quickly your unconscious brain answers them. Number 1. According to the Bible, how many of each type of animal did Moses take into the ark? Number 2. How many triangles are there in this picture? For this first one, did you answer 2? Well, that's wrong, because Moses didn't take any animals into the ark. It was Noah. And what about this one? Did you answer 2? Or maybe 6? 8? 16? Now stop a moment and remind yourself of the definition of a triangle. A plane shape with 3 straight sides and 3 angles, right? Now how many of the triangles that you think you are looking at have got 3 sides? That's right, none of them. In both of those cases, our unconscious brain has jumped to make a link or to fill in a gap. And it's relying on instinct, an intuitive feeling that if it looks right and feels right, it must be right, so go with it, rather than analysis. In evolutionary terms, this instinctive response has helped us survive. The problem is, especially when it comes to tasks that require a rational rather than a life or death response, our unconscious mind is wrong a lot of the time. And research shows that we are at our most susceptible to unconscious bias when we're under time pressure in an area that we feel we are comfortable or knowledgeable in, such as assessing students. Now, we all like to think we're open-minded and objective, but research consistently shows that much of our decision making is affected by unconscious bias. It affects everyone, regardless of culture, social group, education, age, or experience. Now, I know none of this is news to you. You've heard it all before, right? The problem is just knowing it is not enough to overcome unconscious bias. research shows that there is consistently a direct link between unconscious bias and the actual decisions we make. We are susceptible to it all of the time. Right now, teachers across the country are being asked to make judgments on the skills, abilities and knowledge of individual students in order for them to be awarded an exam grade. And we owe it to each and every one of them to do so as objectively as possible, ensuring that the ultimate conclusions we reach are a fair, balanced and impartial assessment of their abilities, uncoloured by unrelated factors and influences. To do this, we all need to take positive, conscious, active steps to guard against unconscious bias. Before we move on though, let's be clear about one important point. In asking you to take positive action to guard against unconscious bias, we are not suggesting you are unprofessional. We are not suggesting you are unfair or unequal in your treatment of students, and we're not suggesting you are consciously biased. We are simply recognising that we are all human, and hence need to take active and deliberate steps to guard against the dangers of unconscious bias creeping into our assessments. Now, before we think about what steps we can actively take to guard against unconscious bias, let's first quickly identify 5 biases in particular that we should be aware of. Number 1, the halo effect. The halo effect describes the tendency for a positive impression about someone in one area to lead us to draw unduly positive impressions about them in another unrelated area without considering the objective evidence or data. In our assessment of students, this bias could lead us to assess a student more favourably than we should in one area on the basis of good performance or behaviour in a different unrelated area. Number 2, the horns effect. The horns effect is the opposite of the halo effect, describing the tendency for a negative impression about someone in one area to lead us to draw unduly negative impressions about them in another unrelated area, without considering the objective evidence or data. This bias could lead us to assess a student more harshly than we should in one area on the basis of poor performance or behaviour in a different area. Number 3, affinity bias. Also known as similarity bias, affinity bias describes the tendency to view people more positively if their interests, experiences, views or background are similar to ours. In a school setting, this could lead us to view students who we naturally positively engage or connect with more positively than those we don't. Our judgment might also be affected by the degree to which we feel a student fits our own mental image of what a good student looks like. Number 4, the contrast effect. The contrast effect happens when our perception of something is distorted by comparison to something else. For instance, in an interview, a strong candidate may appear more capable and experienced than they actually are if they are interviewed after a weaker candidate simply because of the contrast between the two. In our case, this could lead us to view a student as more or less capable than they actually are simply because of the students who we have assessed just before them. Number 5, confirmation bias. Confirmation bias describes the tendency to draw conclusions about a situation or person based on your own personal desires, beliefs and prejudices, rather than on unbiased evidence. It's a consequence of failing to guard against all of these biases, plus many others. Confirmation bias tends to unduly focus on and accentuate evidence that supports our conclusions and beliefs, and ignores and downplays evidence that contradict them. We often use confirmation bias to self-justify our unconscious, possibly prejudicial and likely biased judgments. Again, being susceptible to any of these biases doesn't make you a bad person. It just makes you a person.
So I want to pause here, and it's important for us to see the clear point being made that we are humans. As educators, we are humans, and so it's inherent to see that we do have those biases. I want to allow the video to continue, but I am sure you're identifying from listening to this that you can identify some instances in your experience where you certainly were biased against a student. And so it's important for us to understand that. How do we safeguard against that? Here are some of the recommendations.
This means you're human, but that doesn't mean we just have to accept them. There are things we can do to eliminate or at least minimize their impact. Specifically, there's 4 things we're asking you to do to ensure that unconscious bias does not influence any of our assessments of our students. Number 1, slow down decision making. We know that we are more susceptible to unconscious bias when we make decisions in haste or under pressure, so make sure you are allocating the time and space to perform robust and thorough assessments. Number 2, identify our cultural, organisational and personal norms, expectations and preferences, and ask to what extent they are relevant or might be colouring our assessment. Number 3, reconsider your reasons for decisions. To ensure objectivity, consistency and fairness for everyone, we need to make sure we keep looping back through the process, re-evaluating and reconsidering our decisions on individual students and the cohort as a whole. Number 4, monitor each other for unconscious biases. Because we're all human, our starting assumption must be that we are susceptible to unconscious bias, and hence we need to support and challenge each other to ensure we are doing all we can to eliminate it and hence ensure a fair process. So that means being willing to be challenged and also happy to challenge those around you. We recognise that this is a unique and challenging time for everybody involved, no more so than the students themselves, who after many years of hard work, commitment and dedication will not now have the opportunity to demonstrate their skills and knowledge in the traditional manner. We owe it to each and every one of them to ensure that our process is as objective as possible, ensuring that the ultimate conclusion is a fair, balanced and impartial assessment of their abilities, uncoloured by unrelated factors and influences. To do that, we all need to consciously, deliberately and actively work together to guard against unconscious biases in our decision making.
All right, so thank you so much. And it's important here that we see that as an aspect that's usually not really heightened, but it is a problem in assessment. And so I think acknowledging that and being aware of it, as well as addressing those aspects that were outlined in terms of how you minimize those biases. All right. Another one, and I think Dr. Jones hinted to this, is the whole idea of the real world context. And you can, if you follow the work of Yuri Engerstrom, who look at boundary crossing, it's important for us to see that there is that problem where persons in the world of work are saying universities are producing individuals that are not necessarily ready for the world of work, and so they have to reteach or retrain them in some extent. So there's that boundary crossing that needs to take place, that sometimes doesn't take place that smoothly because of that divide between the work and industry. And so again, that makes a very strong case for authentic assessments in terms from that sense. And we're going to look at that in a while. I want to ask though that in a very meaningful way, we could also look at the whole idea of measuring the ideal UWI candidate or graduate. All right. How well do we do that? I think is one of those things that would be important to address student success, because we may be thinking specifically to the specific course or program outcomes, but in the wider scale of things, how well is that course or program allowing the students to meet those candidates? So it's oftentimes this is something that is placed front and center in your program document, but it is something that we should be thinking of constantly. So that divide between what we do and the wider university ideal is another factor that we can see as being an issue with assessment. And I also think in recent times, we do know that there's one problem that we have in terms of looking at academic integrity in the world of AI, and some are asking whether or not we should be rethinking things like plagiarism. All right. As we are here, I would take the opportunity to just briefly outline that when we refer to AI, I mean, AI has been with us for a while. we are actually referring more to generative AI in that the use of artificial intelligence to generate new outputs or new activities that they are trained, to do in a very meaningful way. So I like what Nancy Gleason says here, that if universities want to stay true to their missions of equity, inclusion, access, then we need to keep and develop these alternative assessments. The task is to design assessments that incorporate AI-generated text, not least because upon graduation, these are the same students who will be using those various technologies in their workplace. Our students are using it. And so one of the things we want to be clear is they're using it in so many different ways. I mean, many practitioners are using it in so many different ways. Student support, curriculum design, and so understanding those is an important part. We do recognize and acknowledge the challenges that exist, with number one being the ethical and being able to use it responsibly. Number three here, unemployment. It's more blue collar who will not be impacted as much as the white collar jobs. So we see a lot of white collar job employments that being impacted because of AI. So that's a challenge. That's a challenge, certainly. And we recognize that. But we recognize that also that there are some solutions. And as educators, we can prepare ourselves. And there is that ethical implications for research and education. I'll put it in the chat in a while. We also have UNESCO giving us guidelines, and these guidelines existed back in 2020, pre-2020. So it's certainly something that we can see as an important component in understanding the use of AI in that setting. All right, I would like to heighten, but we're focusing on the whole idea of adopting responsible use of AI, is that it is, number one, the responsibility of the individual. It's always the responsibility of the individual, whether you are using it and how you're using it. It's clear that we want to ensure that there is some guidelines and there are some limitations in how you're using it. And I think number one is that to own your use of it. You are responsible to understand it within the institutional context. Your institution may or may not have already been adopting this, and it's important to see that being a very important part to understand. All right. I know for many of us is the whole thinking of plagiarism, and I would maybe want to ask whether or not we should be thinking, rethinking plagiarism. We see this here from Matt Miller from his ditch.textbook.com that actually looks at a strand of different activities being more human generated as opposed to bot generated. And so we need to ask ourselves whether or not which of these will constitute cheating and plagiarism. So it's important for us to see that. I know for in fact there are algorithms within our system that will purportedly pick it up, but the research is clear that it is becoming more and more difficult because the machine learning is becoming more in terms of the language. I like this from BBC though. You can see this here. BBC actually has a clip in here that shows, you can see easily even when you're reading text how it repeats. Sometimes it doesn't give evidence, and the language is so simple. So you can certainly recognize it from that standpoint, from choosing using AI. But I think again, I would want to ask, which of these would you be more comfortable with? In the chat, you can give a response. Which of these would you be most comfortable with? I'm not too sure if you guys are hearing me in the chat.
Yes, Dr. Hill, we're hearing you.
Hearing you all right.
Okay. Okay, great. So which of these would you be most comfortable with? There's the maximum restrictive use, there's the encouraging use, there's the mixed use. Which of these in the chat, or if you want to use the mic, that's okay. Mixed use. So Sephra, you're saying mixed use. Anyone else?
Yeah, I like mixed. Right, yeah.
Okay, Dr. Hunt,
Mixed
you're
use.
saying mixed use.
Yes.
So great. So Michelle, Sephra, you said mixed, and so what's the reason why you would say mixed use?
Well, mixed encompasses consideration of the policies and the guidelines for ethical use. And it still allows students the opportunity to use the technology in an ethical way. And it's sort of like a balance, a compromise in having students use it, knowing that they will use it, but we have a policy by which they have to use the technology.
Okay, it's important. Thank you for that. And I think any other persons would have any other reasons to allow the mixed use? Michelle, what would be your reason?
Well, I agree with Sephra that spoke. Yes, you are establishing the ground rules, and that's very important.
Great.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you.
Okay, good. So you're establishing the ground rules, and that's important, so that students know how they should use the system, and what they can and what they cannot do. That's very helpful.
Good, thank you. And I know Stephen and Andrew, you both said the same. Anyone would go for an encouraging policy?
So I am in between encouraging and mixed, sort of.
Okay.
That's why
And what would be your
yeah.
reason in between? Athia, you're very low. You're very low.
Okay.
What would be your reason for the contention between encouraging versus mixed?
I'm just thinking about like experience with students in terms of not even with the AI alone, just generally with their submission of their work. There's that blurred line between what is within the policy versus what is acceptable, and how to juggle that and explain to them, okay, well, this still falls within the issue of it's still not your work.
Yeah.
And so being able to clarify that to them and for them to understand it too, because even now I'm trying to explain to them with things like without AI, just from pulling work from articles and websites, they're still not clear about where they are crossing the line, where they're going over the line. So yeah.
And I think it makes it fair as well, because if you're going to use a yardstick, they need to know what's your yardstick.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Afia, and everyone else. And Dr. Jones is saying the reason why she would want, unlike the mixed use, is because it really looks at the whole idea of incorporating digital education context that, and let's face it, whether or not you ban it, the students are they are using it. It's ubiquitous, and so it's everywhere. They are using it in so many different ways, and I think teaching them the ethical and responsible use is important, and certainly your responses that you give them, the guidance that you give them in your course outline plays an important role in doing that. So these are things you can put it in your course space, you can put it in your online course space, in your course outline, you pull this out, but again, it has to fit within your institutional context. Your institutional context may give you that flexibility in choosing how you may want it. But let's be sure that most persons are not really using the restrictive part, because they recognize that the students are using it anyway. And I'm not too sure how well you will teach them the ethical use if you tell them it's all prohibited, since they're using it already. So that's important. And I also think that many of us are thinking of artificial intelligence as our assistants. In fact, Professor Mike Schappels think about the whole various roles that the AI can play. And so one of the things you may want to ask yourself, which of these would you be more comfortable with AI actually helping you with? And so it's important. Jeffrey, go ahead. Thanks, Juliet.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to share to because I think AI is here to stay, and I think to me, assessment would be also assessing how well a student could actually use it, because it's part of the reality. And I don't know, it's just about formulating those policies and stuff that will make for fair play, but also show that it is just because I was at a conference recently, and the speaker, it was and he was saying, it's not about if, he said, yes, AI will replace some jobs and so on, but where the future lies is there'll be a divided line between those who can use AI and those who can't, and those who can do AI, their jobs will be kind of secure. So I feel it's about testing and assessing those who can use it. So it's really up to us to formulate the kind of guidelines that would ensure that, so that we teaching for that, with that.
And that's important, Stephen. That's important, because how can they leave and enter the world of work if they're not using it ethically? And so I think the responsible ethical use is something that so I'm happy that most of us here, Stephen, we're saying the same thing in terms of things are gonna change. And you're right, because the next slide I want to focus on is those who will be successful are those who knows how to design a good prompt, or they call them prompt engineers. So it is important as academics that it's just like if you're searching Google, you can search Google using Boolean and or for and so forth. If you understand the true algorithm and its true methodology in a search phrase, how you do it and the responses you get will be so intact. I mean, and this is not a session on doing searching for literature search and so forth, but how you do that, and the way in which you phrase it, whether or not you put certain things in quotes, that tells the search engine how to zero in and how to find out. Similarly, when we're using these generative AIs tools, and especially, for example, ChatGPT, we have to think of the context. And one of the things in the context is that you must give the AI a role. You have to give it a role, because if you just tell it, hey, it's crawling the entire internet, the large language models entire internet. In fact, Bing is ChatGPT 4 version 4 is actually crawling the internet live, which means that if you don't give it a context, it will be most likely give you things that are not contextual and understanding, from that sense. So if you give it a role, that you're not looking for a playwright to do it. You're looking for someone to perform a particular role in terms of the roles that we identify with, whether it is a writing coach, if you're focusing on writing, and so forth. All right, the task and the instruction. So I like this because, and I'll put it in the chat where you can read a little further on this. It provides a very good framework to adopt when doing your prompts. In fact, the research also is pointing to, in the work from the Google engineers, they do what is called the step process, where they do not put the entire prompt, because they recognize when they put the entire prompt, there's a higher chance of hallucination. So what they do, they put it in pieces, and they do what is called self-check, or they ask it to repeat or ask it to verify understanding. And so that has been proven to provide higher yields in that. Let's look at an example. Let's look at an example. And if we look at this example, for example, can you all see this? Is it too small? Let me know if it's too small. Is it too small? Too small? Yes, no. Can you all see that? Well, I'll give you
I
a
can
document.
see, thank you,
Okay,
once
so
I move closer.
okay.
Thanks.
Oh boy. Let me give you a link in which you will see, you will get access to this example. All right. Let me know if you can access it. I'll put it in the chat and then you should be able to access it from there. All right. But this is an example presented by, let me know if you all could access this. You can actually see it there. The example in much clarity. In fact, the document is a resource that post session, you can actually use most of those resources there. All right. What we want to do is, can I get a show of hands? I know some of you may already been playing with ChatGPT. Just a show, yes or no in the chat if you've been playing with it a little bit or using it. Yes, no in the chat. Yes, no, yes, yes. Okay, great. Wait, great. So that's important. Great, excellent, great. So what we want to do is to ensure that I can skip some of these slides. All right, is that we want to acknowledge that you can access it. So you can use Google Bard. I don't know which ones you guys use most often. Can you in the chat? Can you share which ones you use most often in the chat? And Andrew is saying he teach with it, ChatGPT. So Andrew, can you share with us how you teach with it? Help us, ChatGPT. Go ahead and share with us how you teach. How do you teach with ChatGPT?
Hi, colleagues. Yes, I use it to teach mathematics, and I do something called error analysis with my students for assessments, because they get, every time they see me, we have class, they get a pop quiz. And I use ChatGPT. When some of the errors they would have made while doing questions in class, I would feed it into ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT to create an error analysis question from that. And in that way, when I bring it back to them, they work in groups and they write and explain why the question is wrong, where the error is, etc., and what can be done to not make this error in using a particular mathematical concept or algorithm. And I also did some qualitative collection of students' responses in my during my in-course evaluation, and they said they really enjoyed that. Although somebody made a mistake, they were able to use it in ChatGPT, generate an assessment.
We're missing you now. I think you got muted. Dr. Hunt, you're muted.
Got bumped off, I don't know.
I'm still seeing him there.
Oh.
I'm still seeing him there.
Hello?
Yes, we're hearing you now.
Hello?
Yes, go ahead.
Oh.
We're hearing you, Dr. Hunt.
We're hearing you. We're hearing you now.
Hello? I'm not sure if anybody got that, what I said.
Yeah, I think the latter part, if you can repeat that, that'll be great. Okay, Dr. Hunt, thank you so much for doing that. I think perhaps we can invite you maybe to do a session for us and how you're using it in mathematics. I think that would be very good to see how other, yeah, we heard your responses, but at the end, you're caught out a bit. You really broke up a bit. So thank you for that.
Okay. Okay, I'm sorry. I think I'm driving. That's why.
Oh, maybe you meet a bad spot.
Yes.
All right. So thanks for sharing though, and
perhaps
we'll call on you to do a show and tell a short show and tell. That'll be
No
great for all the
problem.
math teachers.
Yes, no problem.
It's a pity you can't be here for our cafe, you know. That'll be something
Oh,
great.
yeah.
We next year, April, if you're here next year, April, we can certainly have you as part of that. That'll be great.
Yes, no problem.
Yeah, I think we have the date already. If you can post that in the chat, that'll be great. We're promoting those one time. Thank you so much. So we are seeing persons using it. Thank you, Dr. Hunt. We are seeing persons using it. So I think one of the key things we can look at now is student success. And so we look at the problems of assessment. They're so varied. But I want to take a different trajectory in looking at it from kind of 3 points of agencies. So some perspectives from the student lens, from the faculty lens, from the institutional lens. It's important for us to see it from that standpoint. And from the student end, we want to look at it from the whole aspect of readiness. It's important for us to see it from that standpoint. The student tend not to be successful because they may not be ready. So one of the things institutions do is the whole idea of orientation, careful expectations, having those support services, and making use of opportunity to explain the assessments of why you're doing it, and which is why we're recommending Wilkeme's transparent assessment framework, which is a good framework to really see. From the faculty end, we do recognize that sometimes our teaching approach may not necessarily appeal to the students. We may have communication issues, communication gaps, and assessment approaches sometimes is not transparent, it's not valid, it's not authentic. It does not really address what happens in the world of work. And so focusing on those three recognized from the faculty, and there is something you can do. You can rethink your assessment approach in ensuring that students are more successful. Now, you can have students do very well on a test, but if at the end they get 100% in the test and they are not able to perform in the world of work in doing or transferring those into competencies in the world of work, then I think we need to ask ourselves about success. What does, are they successful? Were you successful in preparing them from that standpoint? Yeah, we did not hear the end. All right, so that's it. Thank you, Juliet. I like this. I put this in the chat, and I think one of the things that it's a really interesting faculty focused article that you can consider, and it points to the use of technology, use of strategies that you can certainly deepen your commitment to in that setting. But what the article points to is the whole idea of Socratic learning, probing your students rather than telling them everything. You use questions in such meaningful ways. And I know that we all know this. we're all good educators. We all know this. And so we do that. Quicker questions, give them practice exam. The whole idea of having summaries for your classes, and knowledge check reading quizzes, and the idea of putting them in groups to do things, small groups to do things. That's an important component. Okay, you should be able to access the Google Doc by now, so that is certainly important. From the institutional setting, we do know that inadequate support for the faculty and students can lead to issues of student success. So if the institution does not support faculty in various ways, faculty and advancement, faculty development, or inadequate student support in addressing challenges that they're having, it's not just mental, it might be physical, socio, and so it's important from an institution standpoint that those are addressed. And so certainly we see those, and quality assurance reasons we mentioned in terms of the time in which your program is reviewed. Some programs are not reviewed for 10, 15 years. And how can that program, really have students that are successful if they are, if it's not reviewed regularly. All right. And I think one of those things that keeps recurring is the whole idea of alternative to paper, pencil, alternative to traditional. And it's important to see here that we use a number of innovative uses. For example, using podcasts, using video summaries, allowing the students to use audio to respond, and those different ways. These are innovative things. You tell them to go ahead and do a newspaper article. And while it should be seen that not all innovative assessments are authentic, but we recognize the need to differentiate the two. All right. And I like to be clear here. I want to be clear on this, because what makes an assessment authentic is that students are asked to perform, they are asked to create, they are asked to produce something. And those are meaningful instructional that are tied to real world applications and real world context. And we know that those are important because, again, going back to one of the problems you have, boundary crossing. The closer you are aligned to the world of work, then it makes it more meaningful. And we know the advantages of using authentic assessment, in that the whole idea of employability. Let's think about it. Your students will be, they will be ready for the work, and therefore employability is something that will be, vanguard. If individuals know that a particular institute or institution, their students are always ready, then there is that idea that, hey, we want students from this institution because we know that they understand our context, and certainly we can see that is important. All right. The whole idea of the opportunity to apply knowledge to real life situation is a big plus, because certainly there's a reward to know that I can complete a task that my career would be aligned to my career aspirations and so forth. But one of the things we want to do is to acknowledge that it's very time consuming. We know that, difficult sometimes to collate and interpret the results, and it is a little bit more challenging to grade and assess. Let's be real about that. And one of the reasons we have is that because persons are not familiar with it, they may choose not to do it from a competency-based standpoint. But it's not necessarily difficult. I think getting familiar with it and allowing students to take greater agency. I know in the world of work, what persons use, they use portfolios, and so that is one of those approaches that's used in ensuring students can demonstrate, and they have a record of that, which includes the evidence around those different things. And thank you, Steph, for you saying students dislike authentic assessment, they prefer regurgitation after memorization. And I think this is the thing we need to kind of explain to them, the purpose. Steph, I think if we will get students who just want to pass the test because that has been more or less traditional, and we need to teach them to unlearn that. But you are certainly correct in stating that many of them are very, very good at taking tests, and so they want to do that. They want to keep it. They want to keep it in from that sometime, and it's a fight. It is certainly a fight. All right. I look at this this little framework here. Do you see the whole idea of authentic instruction, authentic assessment, authentic learning is key to the competency-based learning framework. So those of us who do a lot of engineering and tech work, this is commonplace. But one of the things that we want to see is that we can deepen our commitment by adopting a framework. And one of the frameworks that I want to share is the framework by and his colleagues, Balcomas and his colleagues. And I want to put that in the chat. I'm going to put it in the chat. I'm going to put it in the chat in a while. Multitasking is not good for me because I will not pronounce at the same time. So I'll put this in the chat room. All right. So this is the article. This article explains the 5 dimensions of authentic assessment. It's also in the shared document that you have. And research has showed that task, the form, the criteria, is important. All right. So the task that individuals have to perform, whether or not that task is in classroom context or in the real world physical context. Are you simulating the social dynamism that's taking place? Are you using the same instruments, assessment forms that they're using in the world of work? And so it's important for us to see that the criteria and standards, the same criteria and standards are being used to do that. I don't know if you're going to see this. Let me know if you're seeing this clear. I'm having some issues seeing it clear on my end. I don't know if you are seeing this clear, but if you look at this, you are seeing it clear? Yes, not clear, not clear. Okay, so we'll go on. I'll go on to the specific aspects then, because you won't be able to see that. So the 5 dimensions, and zoom in a little bit in the framework. If we start with the task, and by task we mean the activity that student is carrying out. It reflects what is done in the world of work and the professional practice. All right, what they have to do, rather than doing a paper pencil test, you could ask them to do some of those pragmatic aspects that they have to do. And so that's important to identify. The physical context here, where we will be doing the actual assessment in the world of work, different from the institutional learning environment. All right, so the field work, you do a lot of field work, you do a lot of labs and so forth. So assessment should mirror the way the knowledge, skills, and attitudes we use in the real world context. And the question you need to ask is, where do you have to do it? Definitely not in a classroom, not in the institution. And so that's important for us to recognize. All right. Then we look at the whole idea of social context. And in many of these assessments, if we can mirror the social dynamism that takes place, that makes it meaningful. So interviewing persons rather than doing you could actually have them interview, so they're practicing those research skills from the get-go, and so those are important things that we can see as a key part. So including the processes that are equivalent to those in real life situations, teamwork, collaboration, whether or not the activity would require them working alone, then you try and replicate that. Obviously, we know that more and more work-based things are done in collaboration with others in a team or part of, and so those are the things we want to look at. Then also there is the form, and the assessment form more or less looks at the product or performance or demonstration of competence, and are they doing it in an oral form? Did you have an instrument to check that when they're speaking or demonstrating, or you're observing them? Or is it a report that you're doing? And the key question we're asking ourselves is, what has to come out of this, or what is the result of your efforts? All right, so we're looking at it from that, and it's all evidence in all of those. That's important. And one of the key part to end it is to ensure we have the criteria. How does what you do or you have done have to be evaluated or judged? All right, how does what you have to do or what you have done have to be evaluated. These are the questions you would ask yourself. And it's important here that the standards usually are set by, you know, industry or, and so it's important that we have a clear measure and indication of that. All right, so we do see also in the idea of a different framework is the idea of 70-20-10 on the job experience. That makes it, and I do know in some universities there is that percentage of the program that is required us to do some on the job, but more and more the research is showing that persons learn so much more in the on the job, and you can explore that in full in the research provided there by Jennings and his colleagues. All right. When we say competency-based assessment methods, so things like role play, things like oral presentation, portfolios, which I spoke for previously, written questions are part of that. Nothing's wrong with that. And case studies, nothing wrong with those. And so certainly we see those being commonplace from that standpoint. We certainly know that the future of assessment is looking more personalized, is more looking data-driven and more AI-powered. The idea of multiple or multimodal pathways. I did not mention universal design for learning, but it is clear that because we have more AI-powered, we can have you know, those pathways that are personalized to individuals. So you might have a diagnostic test and or pre-test, and depending on where the individuals you know, their knowledge and the experience, you can have a different learning experience, and more learning management systems provide you to link competencies to assessment methods and so forth. So it's important for us to see the future of assessment is one that is more personalized, that's one that's more authentic, competency-based, again, because of those same issues we spoke about previously. And certainly we want to see that as an important component. All right, we want to take a pause, but I want you to before you go, just recognize that in terms of doing good alternative assessments, you identify the standards. You always start with the standards. Then you look at the performance, how they're going to do it, identify the performance criteria, and then you create different resources like the rubrics and the feedback mechanisms in there. All right. So I know we have 14 of us, let's say 14 of us, some of us. I want for us to perhaps work. We want to work in collaboratively for just 20 minutes in your small groups. And we want to look and see how we would go about, and we want to share the ideas, how we would go about, you know, designing an authentic assessment with the use of AI. You know, first you decide the steps you want to take to convert a traditional essay or another assessment method into one of these or other formats. You can certainly do that. But what we want to do is to have a description, that provides a clear idea. You want to include steps, and you want to include at least 2 of the dimensions that's mentioned previously. So the dimensions, if we are to mention them again from a more holistic view, I'll keep it here. So the task, the physical context, the social context. So certainly, and you also have access to the article. So we're gonna open 2. We'll maybe say 2. Let's make it 2. 2 breakout rooms. Javed, 2 breakout rooms. I think let's make it 3. Let's make it 3 breakout rooms. If we can do that, and take a break, and when you come back, you will see the breakout rooms ready for you. So we'll take a break now, and we will be back in 5 minutes. Is 5 minutes okay? 5 minutes is fine. Take a little break. Yes, no, 5 minutes. Okay, thank you so much. Okay. Great. So you should be in and you should see your request to join to the room. You should see the request to join your room. Go ahead and join your room. Go ahead and join your room. Room number 1. All right. I want to say thank you. I'm hoping that through this activity that you consolidate, creating an authentic assessment and the use of AI. Did group 1? How was the experience? How far did you guys get? Okay, group 1 would have been, well, group 2, sorry. We'll start with group 2. Group 2,
If you could clarify which who belong to which group, because I
Yes,
didn't
you're
actually
in
check.
group 2, Afia. You're in
Oh,
group 2.
okay.
Yeah. You, Michelle, Sephria, and Stephen.
Okay,
Sephra and
great.
Stephen. Yeah. So
All right.
how was the experience? Did you get through to doing the and what tool did you use?
Michelle, do you want to speak? We
Okay,
did
right.
get
Sorry
through.
about that. Well, we did. The thing is, ChatGPT had an overload, so
Okay.
we resorted to Bard.
Okay.
Mhm.
Great. And did Bard do what you wanted it to do?
Yes, it did. It did.
Exactly.
Quite a
So
bit.
yeah. So
But we
how
realized that we also had to check to make sure that the accuracy.
you're right.
Accurate.
So what aspect did you have it to do? Did you tell it to do?
Afia or Sephra, could you respond to that?
Yeah,
Okay.
What aspects? Yeah.
we asked the tool to itemize the steps required to create a poster based on a title or a topic, food security in CARICOM.
Mhm.
And it gave us all the different steps. And then we asked it to, if it could suggest free AI tools that could build a poster, and the tool gave it to us.
Mhm.
And then we asked it to design a rubric to assess the poster, and it did that. And that was it.
Okay.
Yeah, that was it.
So that's I mean 20 minutes. But how long would it have typically taken you to do that? Any group member, how long would have normally taken you to do something like that?
Probably about 3 days, depending on the activity.
Stephen?
It would have taken quite a bit, at least for me, you know.
Okay.
But
I don't know.
what we did realize, Dr. Hill, it was a typical university type task that we were given, where we had to sit and we had to, sift through the information to identify what we needed to do and so on. So it was a typical, we know how the students feel when they have to, okay, we go into our breakout rooms and we have to now sit. So we have to try to identify what is it that we need to do. So that took some time. And then looking back at the material, I'm sure the others would agree with me. Sephra, Afi, and Stephen.
Yeah, it did. It did.
Yeah.
But it simplified the process of outlining what it is we wanted to do, because that alone might have taken us without the tool the entire period that we had just outlining the steps first, and then still having to maybe spend the next time going to find the different free tools that might have been available to help us create the poster. So it simplified that process. And I guess, like she said, took out maybe 2 days out of the process. So
What kind of rubric did it offer? I mean, was it a holistic or?
A holistic.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And well, Afia was, she was able to say, well, based on the 5, what do you call it? Design parameters for an authentic assessment, that we satisfied task and the criteria.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I'm hoping that this is I know you've been using AI, but now you can see how you can actually push the barrier. So let me hear from group 3, and then we'll come back. I see Marsha, your hand is up. Marsha, go ahead.
Good morning, everyone. Dr. Hill, I'm usually always present for class. I don't know what happened today. Please forgive me, sir. When are we doing this session again?
Maybe next year. Well, we have this settled list of events, so
Right.
we'll send you that. We'll send
All
you
right.
that. All right.
All right. This recording though will be on
Yes, the recording will be available. Yeah.
All right then.
Thank you. Group 3.
Yeah, hi, good evening. I think Shamala in group 3.
Dr. Hill, is it
Yes.
possible for
Yeah.
group 3 to share,
To
please?
share?
Yes, you
I
can.
can
Yes,
share
you can.
for group 3.
Yes, you can.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. No, it's not allowing me to.
Or because I am sharing. Let me stop sharing. Good.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you'll have to carry it up, Juliet. Yeah, thanks so much. Okay, so basically we looked at the course Introduction to Curriculum Studies. It's a B.Ed level, at the B.Ed level, year 2. And instead of a traditional assessment or a combination of traditional, we looked at basically a proposal. And the proposal really would be where the students write to the Ministry of Education, asking the Ministry of Education to really put at all levels of the primary school the integrated thematic approach to teaching and learning. So they are writing a proposal telling them all the reasons why this approach would benefit students when teachers use it in an ongoing basis. And we use chat, we use AI, and of course we had some very good pointers, change certain areas in terms of the whole description, the purpose and the rationale. But here it helped us as well in terms of, different areas. And we just had to look at it, strengthen it, and take out what we didn't want. So the purpose basically would be the task to look at students' understanding of curriculum studies, but more importantly, the ability to analyze educational practices, skills in proposing innovative teaching and learning approaches. And, by requiring them to create a proposal for the Ministry of Education, the assessment task simulates a real life world scenario, and of course encourages them to think critically and creatively about curriculum design. And through this authentic assessment, of course, it would demonstrate, if we go further in the rationale, their knowledge of integrated thematic approaches, the ability to articulate the benefits of such an approach, and their understanding of how it aligns with educational goals. And, in terms of developing important skills such as research, analysis, communication, persuasive writing. The tasks, we were going to choose the physical and the social context, but we didn't get to that yet, and time was up. Because what happened while the AI gave us very good benefit, very good information, we also had to fix it to suit what we actually wanted. So that took some time. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much. That's insightful. And can you give us an insight as to your prompt, the prompt that you used? What did that look like?
Yeah, Juliet, I think.
Yes. The prompt we used was it included this part.
Proposal.
The proposal.
Yeah.
The prompt was authentic assessment task for introduction to curriculum studies for B.Ed students, something so. But
it focused on
thematic,
using a thematic integrated approach. Yeah.
So
did you give it a role? What role did you give it?
We didn't give it a rule.
Okay.
That's why
that
we
would have been part of the first part of the framework.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's okay. But I think yes. I just wanted to know in what context, what role you gave it. Because that's interesting. Because some persons give it a role as assistant, as a coach, as a so those are helpful. I'm so happy that we were able to learn from each other. And I don't know if anyone wants to indicate. You can take the mic whether or not you found using AI helpful, and obviously you need to make sense of what it gives you. Again, it goes back to the point we established earlier that you are the ones responsible. It's just as if you ask someone else to help you, your assistant, to make or do something for you, then you have to look over it and you have to verify. And because the AI will hallucinate if it can't, if it doesn't want to give you a no answer, so it will hallucinate where it can. All right.
Also, Dr. Hill, just to say that if you notice there was an overload, I'm not quite sure if the other groups had that with ChatGPT. So we also need to be mindful that we need to vary the AI tool and not
Yes.
have a over reliance on one.
One tool. I'm happy
It's
to
good that
say
we
that.
have other.
Yeah. In the document has well, if and thank you for that, Michelle. The Bing actually uses the engine from ChatGPT 4, and you don't have to pay for it. So you could actually use Bing as well, Bing Chat. If you're using within the system here, you can use it without having to download the Edge. I know sometimes they ask you to download the Edge OS. So thank you for that, Michelle. It's good to use. I mean, I use more Bing because it's more creative. It seems to be more creative. But they're doing the same thing. Most of them are doing the same thing, more or less. So I'm mindful that we can certainly use those to really help us in the busy things that we do. Dr. Jones, go ahead.
Dr. Hill, is Learned AI a tool as well? That I'm not sure I have the right name. Learned AI?
Well, yeah, there are many of them. There are many other apps that use the you know, so I think some of these tools, many of them, they use the API, the application program interface from the ChatGPT large language model. And we certainly see that in the case of Bing. Bing actually uses OpenAI's technology, and it uses the 4.0 technology, which means that it will give you real time without having to pay. Of course, I don't know if they're going to charge eventually, but and we have to keep at the back of our mind that all of these things, they are doing it for money, for profit. And so that is the ethics as well. Whenever we use it, we are actually contributing to the program becoming smarter and wiser. Well, not wiser, smarter in terms of its use. And well, if we're not being paid for it, but they are benefiting from it, you know, if we look at it from that standpoint. So I think acknowledging and knowing those things is important, especially data privacy. These are issues you don't want to put your private information in there, and so forth. Shamila, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think just from this small exercise, which was very, very beneficial, we have to look at the implications of the way we prompt, because, you know, your AI could bring false answers in terms of how we prompt. But of course, there are many benefits as we saw today. But so we want to build, for me, a notion of intellectual property as well, because sometimes you don't see sources. And I may recognize some things from somewhere that would be there. So that is why you have to, you know, look through and make sure that that aspect of it, the ethics, as you see, you look at it, and plagiarism as well. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Shamila. And I think even persons recognize now that you need to be able to attribute or tell someone, hey, I did use AI in generating this. I think attribution, how we attribute is going to change. I think even right now, I think OpenAI has get citation or something like that. You have that, which means they recognize that, hey, persons need to indicate, hey, I did get help creating this with AI. All right. So I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything. I want to say thanks to my colleagues. I didn't introduce them when I came in. So Mr. Randy Duku, thank you for your co-host and helping me. Mr. Mark Garcia, Dr. Julius Jones, Mr. Javed Mohammed. Certainly want to thank everyone for taking the time out of your busy week. It's been a busy week for us. Some of us are tired, but we're still at it. We're still at it. So thank you so much. The learning continues. So you have access to the document, and thanks, Mark. Mark has put in there. Please let us know how we could do things differently. Mark has added the link to the evaluation session. So go ahead and add it in. Take some time and look at it and share with that.
Dr. Hill,
yes.
before you go, could I stay back 1 minute after this, please, with you on the Zoom, please?
Did you say 1 minute?
1 minute or 5 minutes.
Oh,
So
my. Okay. Well, let me take up the recording.